President Trump's former personal attorney is speaking out. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. Michael Cohen gave his first interview since receiving his prison sentence. A judge ordering him to serve 3 years in prison for financial crimes and breaking laws to help influence the 2016 election.
And now he tells ABC News he is done being loyal to the president.
You lied for him for a long time.
More than 10 years.
Why?
Out of loyalty. Out of loyalty to him. I followed a bad path, and hence how we started this conversation.
That path includes making payments to two women who allege having affairs with Trump. $150,000 to Karen McDougal and $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. Trump denies it all.
He's saying very clearly that he never directed you to do anything wrong. Is that true?
I don't think there's anybody that believes that. First of all, nothing at the Trump Organization was ever done unless it was run through Mr. Trump. He directed me, as I said in my allocution, and I said as well in the plea, he directed me to make the payments. He directed me to become involved in these matters, including the one with McDougal, which was really between him and David Pecker, and then David Pecker's counsel. I just reviewed the documents in order to protect him. I gave loyalty to someone who truthfully does not deserve loyalty.
He was trying to hide what you were doing, correct?
Correct.
And he knew it was wrong?
Of course.
And he was doing that to help his election?
You have to remember at what point in time that this matter came about, 2 weeks or so before the election, post the Billy Bush comments. So yes, he was very concerned about how this would affect the election.
White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley reacting this morning on the North Lawn.
The fact that I think the media is giving credence to a convicted criminal.
But he says there's proof.
I understand, but the fact that you're giving credence to someone who's a convicted, self-admitted liar, quite frankly.
Special counsel has it as a court document.
I understand that. He's a self-admitted liar. You guys all know that. And for him to say, I'm going to stop lying now, starting now, is somewhat silly.
So why should we believe you now?
Because the special counsel stated emphatically that the information that I gave to them was credible and helpful. There's a substantial amount of information that they possess that corroborates the fact that I am telling the truth.
And when it comes to the Russia investigation,
The special counsel did say that you were doing your best to tell the truth about everything related to their investigation, everything related to Russia. Do you think President Trump is telling the truth about that?
No.
It's a big statement.
And Cohen could potentially get his sentence reduced if he tells the special counsel more. Also, instead of President Trump, he now says his first loyalty belongs to his wife, children, and country.
Well, one of the crimes for which Michael Cohen was sentenced was campaign finance violations. The president says he, quote, never directed his former personal attorney to do anything wrong. Tweeting yesterday, the hush money payments Cohen made to two alleged Trump mistresses were not a campaign finance violation.
What about Congress, where they have a slush fund and millions of dollars is paid out each year? They have a slush fund. Millions. They don't talk about campaign finance anything. Have you ever heard of campaign finance list? Have they listed that on their campaign finance sheets? No.
Well, a former member of the Federal Election Commission, Hans von Spakovsky, agrees with the president, and he joins us now. Hans, thanks so much for being here.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Set this up for our viewers. What is this campaign finance law, and why do you say Donald Trump did not violate it?
It's called the Federal Election Campaign Act, and it governs the raising of money and the spending of money for all federal campaigns. That's anyone running for Congress or the presidency. Mr. Cohen pleaded guilty to a supposed violation of that law because of payments that were made, I guess you could call them hush money payments, to two women who were claiming that they'd had affairs with the president. The problem with his guilty plea is that those payments aren't covered by the law. The only way these kind of expenses are covered under the law is if they are campaign-related expenses. And these are not campaign-related expenses. This is a potential personal liability of the president, and you actually can't use campaign funds, money that you've raised from campaign contributors, to pay for something like that.
Well, you had mentioned and quoted Federal Election Commission Chairman Brad Smith, who said that these payments to women were unseemly, but they're not necessarily illegal.
Yeah, and that's the key thing for people to keep in mind here. We're talking about what is an actual violation of federal law. And this is not something that the Federal Election Commission, and that's the independent agency that is supposed to enforce this law on a civil basis, and that's where I used to serve as a commissioner, it does not consider that these kind of payments are related to a campaign. Therefore, the rules and regulations don't apply to how that kind of a payment is made.
Do any of Michael Cohen's or the president's actions, Hans, constitute a civil offense?
No, I don't think they do, and they certainly don't constitute a criminal offense. Why? Well, because under the law, to prove a criminal violation of the campaign finance law, you have to prove that it was a knowing and willful violation. You can't prove that when you have former FEC commissioners saying it's not a violation of the law. You have the FEC saying it's not a violation of the law. That raises great doubts about it, and so how can anyone be found to have willfully and knowingly violated the law?
Michael Cohen, he says that this was done to sway the election. So doesn't that make it campaign related, Hans?
No, it doesn't, and here's why. There's another provision of the law, and this is something that the U.S. Attorney in New York is essentially ignoring. There's another provision of the law that says that an expenditure or an expense is not campaign related if it's an expense that would exist whether or not you're running for office. And that's why this is not a campaign expense. You know, this is the kind of claim that celebrities of all kinds get fairly often, and it was not dependent on the president running for office. Yeah, it might affect his reputation and it might affect the election, but that does not necessarily make it a campaign-related expense under the applicable statute.
Hans, one last question for you. If this case, and I hope I'm not getting you to step outside of your lane too much, but if this case isn't based on campaign finance violations, what's the case that prosecutors, you believe, have here?
Well, remember, this was only one of 4 offenses that Cohen pleaded guilty to. The more serious charges were tax evasion and financial fraud in applications that he submitted to a bank. You know, he also pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. But the real offense here, the one that was most serious, was tax evasion. And that's why he was facing potentially a lot of time in jail because of that.
All right, Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much.
And the president is still on the hunt for a new chief of staff. John Kelly is expected to leave the White House role by the start of the new year. And President Trump is narrowing down his list of possible replacements.
We're interviewing people now for chief of staff, yes.
How long is the shortlist now?
5 people, really good ones, terrific people, mostly well-known, but terrific people.
The White House said today it expects the president will make an announcement on his decision quickly.
And for more on those 5 people the president is looking at, we're joined now by chief political analyst David Brody. David, we've seen Chris Christie's name floated out there, and last night he was at the White House speaking with the president, but it sounds like this is a no-go.
Yeah, he's on the no-go list, and that list is growing by the day for sure. Here's what he told Maggie Haberman, from the New York Times. She's always on it, and she's really good in terms of breaking news. This is what he told her this afternoon. It was an honor to have the president consider him, but that he told the president now is not the right time for him or his family to undertake this serious assignment. And so there you go, Chris Christie off the list. I personally thought it would have been a disaster if Chris Christie was going to be chief of staff. He is type A, he is in your face. Donald Trump, type A and in your face. the math on that doesn't seem right.
Well, there's the whole history, too, with him and Jared Kushner's father. Chris Christie put his dad behind bars.
Yeah, and there's that. You know, like as in putting him behind bars for tax evasion, and so they were not a big fan, obviously, of Chris Christie. You got to have the family's approval. It's like The Godfather.
Good analogy here. David, another name in the mix is David Bossie. Politico has an article titled "David Bossie Emerges as a Divisive Chief of Staff Hopeful." Maybe a name that's slightly less familiar to people outside of the Beltway, but give us a little bit of a rundown of David Bossie, and don't mention Jenna's interview with him and Corey Lewandowski.
All right, I won't mention that, but I will mention that Jen and I ran into David Bossie on the campaign trail when we went with Air Force One. There's some name dropping for you. Air Force One with President Trump. But we had a really interesting conversation. Definitely a political operative. Definitely a guy that obviously former deputy campaign manager. So he comes from, though, I have to invoke Corey Lewandowski for a moment because he does come from that Corey Lewandowski campaign, not hard knocks, but brass knuckle, if you will. And so he might rub some folks the wrong way. That could be potentially a problem, but we'll see. He's very talented.
Yeah, and also someone who doesn't seem to have the support of Ivanka, of Jared, and some of the of President Trump's family members. Talk about Jared Kushner. His name is being floated out there as well.
Well, he'd be loyal, and he'd be around for a couple of years, I would think. Yeah, I mean, he would obviously be the kind of the no-brainer pick in the sense that you're not going to have the drama with him, but you will have the PR. He'll get dinged on it from a PR standpoint. But then again, President Trump's getting dinged every day from a PR standpoint, so what does that really matter? Though I don't think it'll work because Jared Kushner is a guy that can be very valuable in a lot of other areas. We've seen criminal justice reform, and he's very much, he's more like a utility player for a lot of different areas of the White House.
David, let's fast forward to 2019. Who is your pick? Who do you think will actually be the next White House Chief of Staff?
I'm horrible at predictions. You guys know that. All right, fine.
That didn't take too much arm twisting.
I think it's going to be Mick Mulvaney. I really do, because the president wants someone that is politically gifted. Mulvaney is that guy. And also, he's looking ahead to 2020, and Mulvaney can also play in those circles as well. And Bo, by the way, he's really kind of, and he'll take this as a compliment, very nerdy budget guy, because he knows what's going on in Washington and can maneuver how to get Trump that wall funding. I think that'll be important too. So,
all right, David Brody, thank you very much.
You bet.
Well, the Senate is expected to vote early next year on the President Trump's pick for Attorney General. Bill Barr held the post in the 1990s under President George H.W. Bush. Amber Strong has this look at Barr's resume and explains why some conservatives are hopeful about his appointment.
With a resume dating back to the 1970s as a CIA analyst, William Barr is a staple around Washington. In the early 80s, he began work for President Reagan, eventually serving as Attorney General for Bush 41.
Respected by Republicans and respected by Democrats.
During his career, the 68-year-old served as a boss to Robert Mueller and on the General Counsel for Verizon. His views on issues such as Roe v. Wade and immigration excite many Republicans, and conservatives are hopeful he'll bring stability to an embattled DOJ.
The establishment's going to be asking the question, will Bill Barr be brave enough to stand up to President Trump? Frankly, the question should be, will Bill Barr be brave enough to stand up for President Trump?
And that's the very thing that has some on the left and the right concerned, particularly when it comes to past statements from Barr seeming to criticize aspects of the Mueller investigation.
I'm glad the president has nominated someone with relevant experience in the department. What I'll be looking for is, will he be working to guarantee the independence of the Department of Justice?
Barr's received praise for his thoughts on counterterrorism post 9/11, but that too could be an issue.
I'm concerned that he's been a big supporter of the Patriot Act, which lowered the standard for spying on Americans, and he even went so far as to say, you know, the Patriot Act was pretty good, but we should go much further.
Even still, most Republicans are confident it will be an easy confirmation.
It shouldn't be all that difficult. This is someone who has a long record in public life. My guess is that when it's all said and done, when it comes to a vote in the full Senate, that he'll have strong support.
No date yet on that confirmation, but it's likely to take place in early 2019. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, why the IRS is relaxing a tax rule for churches.
Christmas traditions fill our homes and hearts with special moments of joy. Now from CBN Documentaries, filmed in 8 countries, Christmas, the story behind the traditions, takes you around the world to discover the history of Christmas and the meaning behind the traditions you love to celebrate. It's our gift to you when you send a special gift of $25 or more to bless people in need this holiday season. Plus, we'll rush you an exclusive holiday treasure, Pat Robertson's recording of A Christmas Carol. You'll love listening to this Christmas classic with your family and friends. Get your copy of Christmas, the story behind the traditions, and A Christmas Carol, recorded by Pat Robertson. It's our way of saying thank you for your gift of $25 or more to help people in need this holiday. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com today.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Welcome back. In economic news, Wall Street ended the week at its lowest point since April. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now down 3% for the year.
The 2017 Republican Tax Cut and Jobs Act aimed to put money in Americans' pockets, but it also had a provision that cost ministries a lot of money. The tax plan imposed a 21% tax on nonprofits like churches for providing employees with parking, transportation, and other benefits. But that is going to change. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says new IRS guidelines on the tax offer flexibility and minimizes the burden to nonprofits. That comes after several senators urged a repeal of the tax.
Well, more than 250,000 kids are placed in foster care every year. And according to the latest numbers from the National Foster Youth Institute, 85% of those children bounce between multiple homes within their first 12 months in the system. So why is one state cracking down on a Catholic group working to find homes for foster kids? Paul Strand has this look.
Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia has been representing foster kids for more than 100 years, but all of a sudden the city's saying you can't do that anymore. Beckett is representing them, this firm that has Nick Reeves, right?
Yes.
And tell me, Nick, what is the problem there? What's going on in Philadelphia?
Sure. There's a big problem in Philadelphia. So over 6,000 children are in the city's care in foster homes and group homes, and the city in March put out a call for 300 new foster families. But at the same time, the city is closing down one of the most effective foster care agencies simply because they disagree with their religious beliefs.
And what about their religious beliefs? What in particular has to do with children and putting them in foster homes?
Sure. So Catholic Social Services has been serving the city of Philadelphia for over 100 years, and they've been doing that consistent with their religious mission since then. But the city has said that if they want to continue working, they have to endorse same-sex relationships, which is the one thing they're not able to do consistent with their ministry. So instead, they're able to refer those families to other agencies, and there are actually 30 foster care agencies in the city, 4 of them within 2 blocks of Catholic. So there isn't really any problem there.
And this isn't that they necessarily discriminate against homosexuals, it's more that they think the kid should be placed in a home with a mother and a father, right?
So Catholic Social Services will place children in single-parent homes and in other homes, and they work with children of any race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity. The one thing they can't is endorse relationships that are not consistent with their religious beliefs. So the city has not even shown any problem here. They're closing down this effective agency without any complaints, without any same-sex couple coming to Catholics seeking to adopt. And instead, it's hurting families like plaintiff Miss Sharonell Fulton, who's fostered over 40 children in the past 25 years and has said she'd be devastated if Catholic closed.
Wow. Now, because foster families, I take it, they don't just operate on their own. They also need help from something like an agency. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. So Catholic Social Services trains, supports, and provides ongoing advice and help to families like Miss Fulton. They have social workers who are on call 24/7. And Miss Fulton has said that her Catholic faith led her to become a foster parent, and Catholic support has been invaluable to her in providing this important service to children in need.
Are you worried that a thing like this is spreading from Philadelphia, that it's spreading to other places as well in the country? Are you worried that this is going to become kind of a trend?
So we are seeing cases pop up in other jurisdictions as well. Beckett represents families and an agency in Michigan, and there was a recently filed case in Albany, New York. One of the concerns we're seeing is that some agencies are facing pressure from the jurisdictions and just closing down. So for example, in Illinois, in another city in New York, and in Boston and Washington, D.C., Catholic foster care agencies have just closed down instead of trying to defend their rights.
And so right now, what is it that you are asking Philadelphia to do?
So I think what we would tell Philadelphia is that there's room for multiple different agencies in the city, and what we need is more foster families, not fewer. So we're working to help Catholic Social Services continue providing its invaluable service to children in need. There's a clear foster care crisis, and 35 beds are sitting empty today because the city won't work with an effective foster care agency.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to hear about all this, but thank you so much for telling us about it. This has been Nick Reeves with Beckett. Thanks. Back to you.
Still ahead, how Israel became a global leader in missile defense.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears. Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Israel is responding to terror attacks in the West Bank. The Israel Defense Force has arrested dozens of suspected terrorists in overnight raids. This after a pair of deadly shootings killed 3 Israelis earlier this week. One of those victims, a baby delivered prematurely after the mother was shot.
Well, since its creation in 1948, Israel has been surrounded by enemies. To survive, it needed a strong military and sophisticated weapons.
Today, Israel is a global superpower with a major missile defense system. Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports on how the Jewish state has used innovation to protect itself.
When it comes to state-of-the-art weapons,
the Israeli military has succeeded in such a short time, in under 70 years, in establishing what's the most formidable, powerful militaries in the world, and possibly the most innovative military in the world.
Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yaakov Kass co-wrote The Weapon Wizards, how Israel became a high-tech military superpower.
Israel is at the forefront of missile defense technology, whether it's the Arrow or the Iron Dome, which everyone is familiar with. Israel is a world leader in drone technology. Israel builds its own tanks. Israel is leading in cyber warfare. Where did all of this come from? How did such a tiny little country in such a short amount of time manage to achieve such great success?
Katz says one reason Israel achieved this level of success is simply survival. 70 years ago, 5 Arab nations attacked Israel the day it was born, a country with only one natural resource.
What was the one natural resource that Israel had? The Jewish brain. And those brains were what was used to be able to survive. So when you have this amazing recipe of threat, of this threat matrix, of your back up against the wall, you have no choice
but to use the one thing you have, which is your brain, and you have to innovate.
And Israel did just that. Case in point, Israel's anti-missile defense system. The Iron Dome has shot down hundreds of rockets fired out of Gaza behind me into Israel.
That's how Israel said, 1 second, we're facing missiles that are coming at us from Iraq, from Syria, from Gaza. We have to come up with a system that doesn't exist in today's world. And that's how they came up with the Arrow, which can intercept ballistic missiles, and with David's Sling, which can intercept medium-range missiles, and with Iron Dome, which can intercept and is proven to intercept over 85% of the missiles that are fired from the Gaza Strip. And that's how Israel has developed this amazing technology that's still highly classified to detect the tunnels that Hamas is digging under the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip, a technology that exists nowhere else in the world. Because Israel's at the forefront of warfare, and because of these threats, it has no choice but to innovate and to create.
Not all of Israel's power comes from high-tech products. It also includes its people, especially how the Army produces a culture of independence.
We all think about the United States Army. Everyone's dressed in their uniforms, right? People take things very seriously. Everyone's saluting, sir, ma'am, all these terms. Israel's completely different. The ranks that you carry on your shoulder are meaningless to the in-between soldiers. That enables free thinking. It allows the chief of staff to speak with a low grunt soldier and be able to talk about things. And when you can talk about things, when you can have that free flow of information and ideas, you can create, you can innovate. People aren't afraid to speak their minds. That's a huge advantage of national proportion that I think you'll find nowhere else in the world but here.
While the U.S. provides major weapon systems to Israel, America's military also benefits from the real-life testing of its equipment.
One of the things that the U.S. benefits from is that Israel is the first country that has operational F-35s today. So now imagine Israel is flying its F-35s and engaging in combat with it, whether it's in Syria or somewhere else in the region. That information is then shared with the United States Air Force.
Katz says while Israel has shared a friendship with America, along the way, it's also had a helping hand from above.
I'm a believer myself, and I think that it can't just be that it's all on its own. Right? The hand of God, I think we see here almost daily in this country, in this region. The ingenuity, the entrepreneurship, the innovation is incredible. But there's that hand behind us that is pushing us along the way.
Katz agrees weapons, technology, and innovation are the centerpieces of his book. But there's more to the overall story.
Yes, it's about weapons. But it's also a story about, it's the tale of Israel. It's a story of an ancient people that returned to their historic homeland and against all odds, not just survived, but persevered. And that is the story of the State of Israel. That's the essence of the State of Israel.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And for more news and information from Israel, make sure to check out the CBN News show, Jerusalem Dateline, which airs every Friday night at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News channel. On tonight's program, we'll take an in-depth look at a new wave of terror attacks in Israel's biblical heartland. For more info on how to tune in, head to cbnnewschannel.com. It is really a remarkable success story that Israel has since its founding in 1948.
Yeah, just miracle after miracle. And there's, of course, the verse in Genesis that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. We've certainly seen to see that play out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.